Let's talk about this one. I bet you know the answer to this. Close to 100,000 people die every year in the United States due to hospital-acquired infections. Infections they got while they were in the hospital. What's the vital behavior that would dramatically reduce this? It's hand hygiene. It's getting everybody to wash their hands before they get into a patient care area and after they leave a patient care area way more than normal. It's simple as that. The vital behavior is wash your hands. Here's another. I bet you know this one too. Auto accidents and auto crashes, right? What are the vital behaviors that could dramatically reduce automobile crashes? They're just 3 or 4. The big one is speeding. If you could get people to stop speeding. Another is distracted driving. A third is drunk driving. And if you want to add a fourth, it would be seatbelts. Those 4 things dramatically reduce the injuries and deaths on our nation's highways. So sometimes the vital behaviors are obvious, but we don't know how to influence people to act on them. But other times they're not so obvious. So here's an example of that. What are the vital behaviors that will stop Guinea worm? Now, fortunately, the Carter Center, Jimmy Carter Center in Atlanta, has figured this one out. In fact, there are only, I think it's 9 guinea worms still living in the world today. There used to be hundreds of millions of infections every year throughout sub-Saharan Africa and into parts of Asia and South Asia, right? There's no medication to take, there's no poison to kill guinea worms, but they've figured out behaviors and ways to influence people in tens of thousands of villages to stop guinea worm. Now, the way they've done it, and this is a clue for you, the way you can find a vital behavior is map the process. In this case, map the process of infection from beginning to end, and then find ways to break that negative cycle. So let's map the life cycle of a guinea worm. So what we'll do is we'll map it, create a process flow map, and look for crucial moments when a small behavior, a vital behavior, could make the difference. So here's a pond. This is a pond that's in Niger. So it's in sub-Saharan Africa, just south of the Sahara. You can see it looks pretty dry there. 3 different villages come to this water source to get their water. Now these villagers, 2 of the villages are about 2 miles away. A third village is about 3 miles away. And these people raise sheep to survive. And they're nomadic people. They travel around wherever the grass is, wherever they can find forage for their sheep. But at this time, this is a place where they can get water for this part of the year. So they come to get water. It's the women and children who come to get the water. The men are off tending the flocks of sheep. They carry the water back to their villages. So think if you walk 2 miles to get to the water source, you pick up as much water as you can carry, and you carry it 2 miles back. You do 2 or 3 of those round trips every day. Hard-working people, right? Now, when you get back to the village, this is what the water looks like. Kind of cloudy. In fact, if you held it up to the sun, you'd see little wrigglers in it, like the little sea monkeys you used to buy on the back of comic books. They're little shrimp, right? And if you drink the water, you drink the shrimp, right? And inside the shrimp is the larva of the guinea worm. And the guinea worm lives inside your stomach. This is really gross stuff. I hope you're not right up to lunch, right? They use your small intestine as a big singles bar. The male worms meet the female worms. They date, they flirt, they fall in love, they mate, and at that point, the male worm dies. He's done his thing. The female worm burrows out of your intestine into your stomach cavity, and she begins to grow till she's about 1 yard long. She's the largest human parasite. Now, she lives inside you for a few months, but at some point she needs to get out. Why does she need to get out? Well, she's already mated, so she needs to find a place to lay her larva. And where does she need to lay the larva? Back in the water, right? So she's evolved an incredibly interesting way to get you to carry her back to the water. She starts excreting acid out of her mouth and burns through your flesh, creating an excruciating, burning pain. So what do if you live in sub-Saharan Africa and you don't have access to medications? What can you do to cool a burning pain? How about put your foot back in the water, or wherever she is? If you put her in the water, what does she do? She lays her larva, right? And does she lay just one or two? No, hundreds at a time. So how many people does it take to reinfect a water source? Just one. So we can map this and say, okay, here's the way it works, right? A villager drinks from the water source, the larva mate, the female worm grows, the worm emerges, and the victim re-enters the water source, and the worm releases her larva. So where in that cycle could you break it? That's the challenge the Carter Center had, because those would become the crucial moments where you could have a vital behavior. The first vital behavior was, how can you have people drink safe water? Now, in some parts of the world, they could drill deep wells. That worked in places like Pakistan and Bangladesh. But in sub-Saharan Africa, it wasn't going to work. First, because the wells had to be too deep, because we're talking Sahara, right, the desert. And second, because the people are nomadic, right? So that wasn't going to work. Then they thought about, are there poisons we could put in to kill the worm in the water source? The answer is no. Haven't found one. Nope. So what they ended up doing was they found a way to filter the water. So they filter the water before they drink it. The only challenge is you've got to get millions of people to do this. Second place, where else can you break this cycle? It's when the victim re-enters the water source, right? Can you get people who have an ongoing infection from not getting back in the water? That's the second vital behavior. So if we look at these behaviors, the first one is filter all water before drinking. The second one is don't put infected limbs back in the drinking source. The third one is maybe a little counterintuitive. How many people does it take to reinfect the water source? Just one. So the third vital behavior became holding people accountable for the first two. Those became the three vital behaviors. They've been working those vital behaviors now for more than a decade, and they have reduced guinea worms so far that they believe within the next 12 to 18 months it will be extinct, wiped off the face of the earth forever. Okay, now let's get to the other hard part. How do you motivate and enable change? Once you've identified the vital behaviors, whether it's getting people not to speed, or guinea worm, or getting people on your project team to talk about it when they're missing a deadline, right? Depending on what that vital behavior is, how do you motivate and enable change? The challenge is that your world is perfectly organized to create the behavior you're currently experiencing. In our lingo, it would be all 6 sources of influence are holding the status quo captive and preventing working against change.